Welcome to the thrilling world of Security Squawk, where we explore cybersecurity. Guiding you through online threats, we'll aid you in understanding safety protocols and trends. Meet our gurus, Bryan from Exact IT, Reginald from Arc Solvers, and Randy from Tech Rescue. Together, we'll delve into current events and hot cybersecurity topics, helping you comprehend their impact. Stay informed, stay secure. Security Squawk, the business of cybersecurity. Buckle up, let's dive in.
All right, guys. So here we go. Small community banks customer data, so security numbers, account numbers, the works, all got stolen because their software vendor's firewall had a bad line of code, and nobody in that chain told the bank anything for 74 days. Welcome to Security Squawk. I'm Bryan, joined by Randy and Andre. Today we've got three stories that, when you line them up, basically tell you that everything's broken. And how businesses manage cybersecurity risk right now is also broken. Randy's got a brand new extortion group that figured out if you don't have to break into a big company, you just break into whoever answers their phones. Andre is going to talk about how Microsoft has got a new research on a ransomware group that can go from we're in to you're encrypted in under 24 hours. And we're going to talk about why that's kind of a new revelation and how that's, extremely lightning fast for what we've seen in the past.
Yeah.
And I'm going to wrap the show up with a story about 80 community banks and about 1 million people whose financial data got stolen, not because the banks did anything wrong, but because the company they trusted did. And we're going to talk about what that looks like again and dive into more talk about that third-party risk that we've been hammering out for about 6 months now, right? We've been talking about it. So, Randy, you're up first, though. You got this new group, UNC 6783, if I got it correctly. They haven't been around long, but they clearly have done their homework. Maybe they do have some seasoned professionals that have been around for a while in the group. Who is this group? What's going on? And why do you want to talk about them?
Yeah, so they're kind of new kid on the block, if you will. We've heard a lot about Scattered Spider, Shiny Hunter, and how they're able to do social engineering and all that jazz. And these guys, UNC 6783, most likely they are the group behind the raccoon persona, who is mentioned in this article. But basically, what they were able to do is they were able to get 13 million Adobe customer support tickets. So people sending in tickets of, Adobe products. You couldn't get a picture to do this or that or whatever. They were also able to get 15,000 employer records, internal documents. And this one's kind of crazy. They were able to get their bug report bounty submissions. Basically, most companies have this deal where if you find a bug, like where a hacker could use their software, and you submit it, you can maybe get a prize, like $10,000 or $500 or $100,000, depending on the company. Well, the bad guys were able to get that as well. So basically a list of all the vulnerabilities, most likely vulnerabilities that they were still working on. And so the thing is, what they did, they were able to fish, basically a spearfish, one of the employees, and this is where it gets kind of crazy. They were able to spearfish an employee at an Indian company that is basically like a business process outsourcer. So basically a totally separate company that's outsourced to do the support for Adobe. And put a pin in that. We're going to talk about that in just a second. But anyway, they were able to fish one employee there. They through the fish attack, they were able to drop remote access on that machine and basically watch them work through their webcam. And then they used what they learned there to fish the manager of this company. And this is crazy. Once they fished the manager, they got on his computer and they exported all 13 million tickets. So all tickets that this company had ever touched through Adobe, excuse me, I'm a little under the weather, but all the tickets they had ever touched, they were able to export. So no alarms went off, no like alert, no call from like the SOC team, hey, did you mean to download 13 million records? No alert. Hey, we just saw 13 million records go across the firewall or get downloaded onto a machine. Like no alerts or anything. So real quick, here's why this matters. It matters because almost every single business, I mean, I would have to guess, 90+% of businesses outsource something. So they outsource payroll, which is probably the number one, like most common. They outsource their IT. They outsource IT customer service. They outsource bookkeeping. They outsource HR. And the reality here is our security is only as good as our weakest links. And I want to kind of get y'all's thoughts on this, and then I want to come back real quick, Bryan, and kind of close with some ideas of what we should be doing. But y'all have any thoughts or comments on that so far?
Yeah, I mean, this is really next level, right? The way I would look at this is you have to also take a look at your employees and what type of access that they have. And if they have access to export, 13 million records or whatever like that, you also have to take a look at it as, okay, well, that may be a good reason they're doing it, but then what could be the bad reason if a threat actor gets in? So same thing like your help desk. Your help desk can reset passwords, but if someone were able to get into your help desk systems or a user, what could they do, and what steps are you taking in so that way even if someone did get that credentials, they wouldn't be able to do the same thing as your authorized person. So this is just like more of another shift that you have to look at it at, because right now we're always thinking about, okay, firewalls, antivirus, but when they're in, what is now your playbook for that?
Yeah, we've been talking about this on the show specifically off and on. I think Bryan mentioned 6 months and maybe even longer. But this is something that there just seems to be a real rash of these recently, going through that third-party vendor of some sort who has access to a lot of your stuff. And, Bryan, did you have something to add? I was going to close up with some ideas, but you good?
You're good.
So, some things that you need to really think about. What kind of access are you giving to a third party? Have you checked your vendors? Have you vetted your vendors' security? We can't assume it. Do they have fish training? Do they have MFA everywhere? Are they constantly griping to you about all the security hoops, that they have to jump through? So if they do that, that should be a warning sign. You also want to make sure you know who all of your third-party vendors are. Make sure you know what they have access to. If there's any way, limit their access. So if they have API access into your tickets, make sure they only need what they have access to or whatever. Also, we're going to have to really, I'm going to close on this, but we're really going to have to look at how we do MFA for people that call in, for people that need like passwords changed and things like that. Because what we're seeing with these guys is they're using AI to basically build a persona of you, your voice, the way you look, all that jazz, and they're able to call in and get access to things that they probably shouldn't. So you've got to have a process in place where you are verifying the identity of the people that are, like calling into your help desk. And I would just say, from experience, red flags always should go up. If there's any kind of like an emergency or something like that. That seems to be where stuff happens. And I think that's probably the last one. Oh yeah. So going back to MFA, we've really got to start looking at things where MFA doesn't rely on like a text code, which your help desk texting to a known number, that's better than no kind of identification at all. But what if you could have a hardware key plugged into the machine that verifies that's the actual machine? What if you could have a code generated like on a banking fob or something like that? They've got to give you the code. It's time-based. What we saw in this particular case was in one of these cases that was involving with this group was they had access to the machine, so they were picking up the codes because they could see them. So a lot of stuff here, a lot of stuff to think about, and a lot of stuff that's we're going to see a lot of this in the upcoming months.
Yeah, yes, you are, because according to the Verizon data breach report, these third-party attacks or this third-party risk has increased from 15% to 30% in just 1 year, right? So we're not wrong on this show by highlighting the fact that this third-party risk is something that we've been harping on, like I said, for about 6 months now. And companies are so far behind the 8 ball on understanding that this is the new world that we're living in. And hackers understand this. Hackers, the one thing that I'll give them is cyber criminals are very good at looking at the whole entire picture of how industries, companies operate, and figuring out, like, you know, as you guys put firewalls in places, you put endpoint protection in places, you put all these things that, like, somebody along the way comes along, whether it's your own IT team, your cyber insurance company is giving you this checklist of stuff that you have to do in order to have your insurance premiums pay if you ever file a claim. These are all things that have been happening over the last 5, 6, 7 years, which have brought companies up in terms of their cyber risk and their resilience. And hackers have noticed it's harder for them to do things than it was maybe 5, 7 years ago. But they pivot quickly, and they're very good at looking around and going, oh, look, all these companies seem to use outsource IT companies, outsource HR companies, what have you, right? Well, maybe we can go after those companies, right? And maybe we can do things that, you know, these are things, and you guys will agree, the things that these cyber criminals are exploiting are not things that are in your cyber insurance, right? They're not part of a checklist that your cyber insurance says, do this, do that. They're not exploiting this stuff.
Right.
Verification of who's calling in and whether or not that's legit is not a requirement on anything I've ever come across. And I'm a compliance person, right? Like, I mean, there's certain deep level compliance out there that do kind of make you do things the right way, like know who's logging into your system and make sure you have that logged and things like that. You know, CMMC comes to mind, things like that. But that's only for level 2. Level 1, they don't really care that much, you know, when it comes to what I just said.
And can these I don't want to jump into your article, Bryan, but can these third-party companies, supply chain, you know, people, can they even afford the backlash that they're going to get from the lawsuits, right? Because just think like how we're going to be talking about your article in a few minutes, where you may have 20, 30 different banks all going after this one company at one time for lawsuits. Can they even absorb all of that, you know, type of thing?
Yeah, it's great to be winning in business, you know, but sure, you have massive risk as you build client after client after client, especially in these third-party companies. And it's not just IT guys, right? We've seen this. We've seen payroll companies be taken down that have shut companies down for long periods of time that have caused, you know, harm to their business and things like that, right? The other side of this is, you know, let's just talk about this group that Randy brought to the table today. This is the same group that hit MGM and Caesars the same way, right? Through the help desk, right? And so like they're very persistent, right? That was in 23. That
that was a
Caesars
couple
and
years
MGM
ago.
had? Yeah, right.
Yep.
So I mean, 3 years later, we're still doing the same thing against very big companies, right? Just I don't know if you said this, Randy. Excuse me. I don't know if you went into details of this. just for Adobe, right? I can't believe Adobe outsources their IT in the first place. That blows my mind. But this company that handles Adobe's has to handle 13 million support tickets, over 15,000 employees. That's a lot.
It is.
Right? For any company to handle. That's why Adobe outsourced it, because they're like, man, we don't want to do this. Right? So they outsourced it to a company. It's like, we got you. No, they don't. Right? And how many times do you walk into a prospect, or maybe you lose a client to a competitor because they think, oh, well, they're 30% your cost, and they say they do the same thing.
Right.
And we know. I'm not going to sit there and tell them that they're wrong or that they don't know what they're talking about, because I've seen it a million times. Right? They're just throwing a number at you, and the salesperson or whoever is trying to close that deal is telling you whatever you want to hear. It's on you to figure out if that company is as good as the other company across the street or whatever. Right? We're not all the same, and we don't all do things the same way. So if you don't understand that, and you don't select the right vendor, or select the right IT person, or select the right CISO to run your company, you could be in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm going to leave everyone with this. When was the last time you asked your software vendor who answers their support line and what access that person has to your data?
Yep.
Because I have competitors in my area, guys, that have 80 potential people that can answer that phone for any one client. At my company, there's only 4 people who are going to answer the phone for a certain company. 4. And there's a reason for that. This is the reason. Because I'm hoping those 4 people get to know faces, voices, patterns, right? And they can pick up on like, hey, this doesn't sound like somebody from that company. If you're just somebody who works on a help desk where you're answering a call and you don't even know who you're talking to on the other end of the line, and that sounds like your IT company, you might have some risks that you don't think you have right now. So check it out. Andre's getting a shout out from Glenn.
Yep. Hey, Glenn.
Good segue there. We'll move right into Andre there. So Andre, you got this Medusa, or Medusa as I used to call him. Ransomware 0 days. This is one of those stories, Andre, where the more you dig in, kind of like my story, the worse it gets. So take us through why you feel like this Medusa ransomware 0 day is important to talk about today.
Yeah, so we got some research from Microsoft, which is one of those researches is like, you really took the time to do this. It's like, didn't we already know this? But as like you said, as you dig in, you kind of realize, okay, there's some good points here. So what this research from Microsoft is talking about is Medusa, which is a ransomware group. They've been around since 2021. And as we talked about just a few minutes ago, of how they've really matured in their ways. So back in the days, only 5 years ago, what would happen is, bless you, Randy, what would happen?
No, that was the spider landed on my keyboard, man. Sorry.
That's scary. Okay, so what would happen back in the days is hackers would have to kind of just figure out how to get into your systems step by step. Many times they would have to try to guess the passwords. They would have to do brute force attacks. And that's just basically like really noisy activity. And then from there, typically, you would have a firewall or antivirus catch it because it's so noisy. And, this is taking days and weeks. But what this article is talking about and what this research from Microsoft is talking about is they're now basically breaking in and locking down the entire network within 24 hours. So, and they're highlighting how it's really anything that's connected to the internet, email servers, VPN, file transfers, any type of tool that they can get into the front door, they're going to come in, and they're not coming loud anymore. They're using, like we just talked about with Randy's article, they're using the tools that's already on your machines to get in. So as AI, as we always talk about, is helping us on the good side, AI is also helping us or helping them on their bad side, because what is happening is, as I think in the green room, Randy, you're talking about Entropic, of how they're, Bryan, about how, was it Firefox? Was it?
We both were talking about it, how the latest version that they've not released to the public found like 700 vulnerabilities in Firefox. Something crazy.
Exactly. So being able to use these, what is called 0 days, where it's the updates are not even released to the public, and they're able to now use these 0 days, which has always been there, but the speed of it is what this article is kind of just talking about, how they're weaponizing these flaws before the patches come in. And because of that, there's going to be more ransomware attacks. And that's kind of the spiel of what we're getting into here.
I mean, everything you just said there, plus everything I know about this group, pardon my French, but you're all fucked. I mean, you're just like, let's really break it down, Andre, right? They're going after 0 days. So you're not patching the system. Okay. So your patch management as any kind of security strategy is out the window with this group. Now you got this 24-hour clock, right? So if I can get in your network and I can find a 0 day that I can exploit, which with AI tools, and like, look, y'all might be waiting for Anthropic to come out with their thing, but there's stuff already out there, like that these guys are using, right? So, you know, we're not just waiting for this one tool to wreak havoc on the world when it comes to cybersecurity and exposing. I think that's what Medusa is going to do. It's going to expose companies for not doing the stuff we've been harping about on this show for the last 5 years. It's going to put a huge microscope and spotlight on it at the same time. So you got this 24-hour clock now, Andre. Somebody breaks into your network on Friday, right? If you're set up to where you can only check your systems on Monday morning, you've given this group more than enough time to encrypt everything that you own. Now, let's just talk about how good this group is. University of Mississippi Medical Center, we covered that one about a month and a half ago. Yep, this group hit them. They've hit more public schools than you could shake a stick at. Minneapolis public schools being one of the top ones. Toyota Financial, another one. Oh, and by the way, this group doesn't hit you once. They steal your data first, encrypt it, and then you're paying them for a promise that they're going to take care of you, and then they come back and hit you again. If you don't follow their directions and patch everything that they tell you need to patch, and or hire them to do it. Right? You can hire them to do it for you. If you don't, here's the list. We're going to come back and get you. If you don't, and like we see companies make that mistake over and over. They hire somebody. Here's the list. You know, I don't know what they're saying, but I can only imagine the CEOs going, here's the list. Make sure you take care of us. And the company they hire goes, yep, we got you. And the next thing you know, they're dealing with ransomware 2 months later. Again, right? Happens all the time. So the other thing I can tell you is that like this group, who they hit is part of the reason that this is true, what I'm about to say. But this organization, I mean, DHS and FBI have to hate them, because almost every time that this organization hits a US-based company, FBI and DHS get involved. And they don't seem to be slowing down. They've been around for a while, guys.
Yep.
We're talking about them since I was calling them Medusa. I mean, I remember the first time we covered them, because I didn't know, I never heard of them.
Mhm.
and I was calling them Medusa. So, because they were attacking hospitals, and it made sense to me in my brain
Right.
that's what it
That's
was.
just that's proof you're a reader when you don't know how things are pronounced, because you can go years without ever hearing it on a podcast or whatever. You just read it all the time and you never know, right?
It was a new term, and these ransomware groups call themselves all kinds of crazy stuff. So,
Right.
So
you never know.
I want to throw in a couple thoughts here. So we went over an AI attack about 2 months ago, and basically it was the first known AI directed. They tricked the AI into thinking it was a red team, blue team exercise, and that the AI was doing good out in the world. And they were saying that in that case, the lateral movement was happening within 90 seconds. So the 24 hours, that's great for a human. But I think with AI, we're going to see that just melt down to almost nothing. And, it really, we can't just have a one layered approach. So it can't just be patching and some antivirus. Like, you've got to have multi-layered approach. So if they take advantage of, a 0 day, that then, okay, so they're there, but they can't move anywhere because you've got another thing in place to keep that from happening. Because we really just are going to have to rethink. I think you touched on this a second ago, Bryan, but so just to add to that, we're really going to have to rethink how we do security. And the old, one of our banners is, hey, a business email compromise, we can get you in and out of that, researched, locked up, fixed, blah, 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 all in 90 minutes. Well, that's all great till AI comes along, and in 2 minutes, AI is doing all kinds of nasty stuff that people can't do that fast before we can block them out. And then you've got the whole, I know if I'm on a tangent, but in 365, it has a certain heartbeat. So when stuff happens, it doesn't just tell you right that second. I know 5-6 years ago, my guess was that heartbeat was around an hour. Maybe it's a little more, but that heartbeat's got to be a lot faster for things like this. And I did read one thing about these guys, that they would go into backups and search for backups that were like Excel sheets of passwords, and then use those passwords to get admin access to other things out in the network. So y'all, your IT guy ought to have a heart attack if they find out that you've got an Excel sheet on your server with everybody's password. It needs to be in a separate password keeper. Yes, that could get hacked as well. But once again, we want to layer everything, so it's not just easy to come, it's like they just swoop down into the network, and they're just, just running around from system to system, doing whatever they want. We just can't set it up like that. And we've got to think differently about how we handle it these days.
They're netting 20, according to ChatGPT, they're netting 20 million a year. So a lot of good incentives on them.
Yeah.
Think about their research and development budget, right?
Randy, your LastPass is still your favorite password manager, right, Randy?
Yeah. We had a whole segment on that, man. LastPass was brutally hacked. I'm talking about hacked, beat up, hacked again. It was one of the most humiliating hacks that I can think of. So, I wouldn't suggest that. So, I know a lot of people love it. But your stuff, especially from when that happened, we don't know if it's in the hands of the bad guys or not, because they got into that thing pretty bad.
Yeah.
So yeah,
and it just goes back to what you said earlier. I think at the top of the show, these attacks happen in 24 hours. If you don't have detection, you're not playing defense. You're not protecting anything. You're just hoping you're not next. And it's pretty simple. So, all right, guys, wrap it up here. My topic, and this one, I think it's It's really one you're going to want to sit with because, on the surface, it sounds like a story about a software company getting hacked. But when you pull the thread, it's actually a story about how the entire vendor trust chain, and I wanted to dive into this one because we keep talking about this third-party risk so much. This gives you like just a mind-blowing example of how bad it can get when you're just plugging along, running your business, and somebody else has a problem, and it's kind of dirty tentacles reach out and touch you, so to speak, right? So here's what happened. A company called Marquis Software Solutions, they make core banking software for small community banks and credit unions. They got hit with ransomware around mid-August of last year in 2025. And that attack exposed the financial data of about 823,000 Americans across 80 banking institutions, and it also exposed the financial data of those banking institutions. That's important too. So hackers were able to run away with Social Security numbers, bank account numbers, dates of birth, and the attack didn't start at Marquis. It started at their firewall vendor, SonicWall, 6 months earlier. And all those banks got breached because Marquis decided to install SonicWalls at all of these banks. And the tough part is that many of them didn't even find out until 74 days after the attack happened. So 74 days. Marquis got hit on August 14th, and they didn't start notifying financial institutions until around October 27th. So guys, could you imagine if we go back to our last story, 24 hours, the damage they could do?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The new benchmark is 24 hours. You have a ton of time here to get this done. There's 80 community banks out there. Some of them, they serve our communities, right? These are teachers. These are municipal employees. These are small towns, right? But probably not a lot of banking options. Wells Fargo doesn't go where these banks go, right? 74 days, all these banks, 80 of them, had no idea that their customer data was being stolen, siphoned off, and being pumped into the dark web or God knows where else. So these institutions have regulatory notification requirements that weren't met as a result of these decisions or the way that this went down. So the FDIC, the NCUA, and there are federal rules about how fast you need to disclose. But those rules apply to the bank, not the software vendor, or do that? That's the question, right? Here's a new thing that has popped up in the legal world, right? Because, dude, I do compliance. Like, if you're going to hire a company to run your firewalls, yes, the bank is ultimately responsible, but that bank needs to make sure that third-party vendor is doing it exactly the same way that they're required to by the regulation, by the law, by the compliance, whatever it is. So the gap there is understanding. It's boardroom, it's C-level. It's the people at the banks not understanding that Marquis, who obviously became the flavor of the month or the year for IT for this particular industry, if all of these 80 banks are using this same one vendor. They failed to realize Marquis isn't regulated by the FDIC. They're a software company.
Mm-hmm.
But their contracts are with these banks. And with that contract, that requirement, that regulation flows down to that third party, in my opinion. But 74 days passed and Marquis thought nothing of it. So again, it goes back to you have to understand who you're working with. You have to ask questions. Hey, dude, we have MMC requirements. We know that we have to do X, Y, and Z like this, and we're handing that off to you to handle for us. Are you doing it this same way, and can you prove it to us? That's the kicker right there. you, as the person writing the check, can demand that your third-party vendor prove that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing with your data, with your software, with whatever you're entrusting them with. You guys agree with that? You see anything?
No, I agree. Because you can easily point the finger at Marquis, you can easily point the finger at SonicWall. But the reality is, if you're the custodian of that data, if the client is coming to you and saying, here's my social, here's my information, that bank has to be in charge of that. And like Marquis is, from my understanding, is a marketing software, marketing service company. So why in the world do they have social security numbers and all of this PII information? So so there's a problem there too. They overextended the information that they were providing. So again, that's why I would have to point the finger at the bank. But again, normally how it happens is the Marquis comes in, hey, we're at 5,000 other banks, we're the gorilla, we're the top dog, we're SOC 2 compliant. They'll just throw that in to make everybody feel better. And then after that, they just do the API integration, set it and forget it. And the bank just thinks, okay, they're handling it. It's their responsibility for the security until we have this, and it's really not.
Oh, go ahead.
So yeah, I just want to, because there's this we haven't even gotten to the other side of this yet, right? You're 100% right, Andre, with what you said there. With like, it's this lays with the bank, and the more and more I dove into this situation, the more and more I was like, holy crap! Our mindset as just a society is so backwards on this stuff. It's not even funny, right? And we're going to get into why I think that is here in a second. But yeah, the bottom line is if the CEOs of these banks did what Andre said, which was take ownership of what they need to do here and understand that this is their problem, not Marquis, not SonicWall's, but their problem. Each individual bank should have taken the responsibility and the ownership to make sure that things are being done the right way. But instead, they got lazy. They chose the chosen vendor, the anointed one, apparently. When one company has this much business in an industry, it doesn't happen by accident, and it doesn't happen by great marketing. They go to an event, they're all at these conferences, and they all start picking this vendor because whatever reason, right? And you guys know it, and I know it. We've been to these events in our own industry, and not everybody does business with companies because they're a good company or they take care of your data. It's because they bought the bar after the event one night. And that's real, right? That's business, right? So here we are where Marquis now looking around and going, shit, we had to pay all this money. We had to pay the ransom, right? Because they had to pay a ransom to get all their banks back up and running. They didn't tell the banks that they paid this ransom for more than 2 months, right? So this company's integrity is like so far below the gutter, in my opinion, at this point, from everything that I know, and I'm not even halfway through, that you're like, oh my God, like what the hell is this? How does this company even exist with the way that they operate? But here we go. The salty little company decided to turn around and go, hey, we're going to sue SonicWall, right? So we have CEOs at banks failing to do what they're supposed to do. Now we have a company, a technology company, a software company that failed to do what they were supposed to do. And now they're like looking around going, let's go after the firewall vendor since it was their firewall that got breached. And we're going to talk about whether that's right or not, right? So SonicWall had a breach of their own in February of 25, guys. Their cloud infrastructure, a bad API change, as somebody alluded to, that exposed firewall configuration settings, and unfortunately, Marquis was included in that group. And the attackers took those credentials that they stole from the vulnerability, which at the time was a 0-day, and they got those credentials to get into Marquis 6 months later. Okay? Marquis is saying SonicWall's mess started the whole chain. They're not wrong, But we also have 80 banks that were hacked and almost 1 billion people's financial data floating out there because somebody didn't do something correctly. And it's now the courts and the U.S. court system, and I don't know if this is going to go to a judge or a jury or whatever, but somebody's got to figure out who is at fault here. So
Yeah,
go ahead.
I was just going to say that that SonicWall 0 day, I believe that if the bad guys pwned it during the part where it was unpatched, that later if you came back and patched it, they still retained access after the patch. So just patching it wasn't good enough to fix it. I wonder if that's what happened in this case.
Right. So there's a couple of things that, you know, we can get into about the topic, right? You know, we can get into the fact that community banks, a lot of them operate on a faulty business model for the amount of regulation that they have. What I mean by that is a lot of them have like one IT person or an IT director, and then they've bought into outsourcing a lot of their IT software at these community banks, right? They don't run, you know, if you work a bank at a community bank, you log into a website to check your bank account. That's not your bank running that website. That's some third-party company that they hire.
Yep.
Your mobile app, same thing.
Yep.
Anything that you're getting communication-wise, text message, stuff like that, that's all going through a third party. You have to understand that, right? These community banks don't audit these software companies. They didn't audit Marquis. What they do is they buy their software, they plug it in, and they trust it. Right. And fundamentally, these things need to change at a lot of companies, not just community banks, but the buy and trust mentality and thinking that you can run your organization, especially if you have compliance guys, with one IT person. Even if you're like, hey, we'll just have that person run point on all of it. We're just going to outsource everything. And that guy's just going to run point on those relationships. You probably still need multiple people in that chain for a lot of different reasons that I'm not going to get into today, right? So we have these community bank CEOs, and again, I don't want to pick on community banks too much because we see it everywhere. We see it at school districts, we see it at community colleges, right? It's everybody. CEOs are trusting these brands and the contracts too much, and that's not enough anymore. Once you sign the contract, you need to audit. And that's what you need to do. And you have to continue to do that if you're going to outsource. Otherwise, you're going to get hacked. So here's where it gets really interesting from a legal standpoint, guys. Marquis is not just suing SonicWall, right? They're now defending a 36-plus consumer class action lawsuit. They're also getting sued from below, from above, all over the place, and somewhere in the middle. Like SonicWall, like they're getting sued left and right, and now they're going after SonicWall, right? And SonicWall is out there with their lawyers saying this isn't our problem. So this is really going to be a landmark case for where liability lands when it comes to the stuff that we talk about on this show all the time, third-party risk, right? The courts can come out and say, you know what, this all falls on the banks. The banks should have done a better job at so like Marquis, in my opinion, has really brought this to the forefront, and it's going to allow the court system to decide where this lands. And I'll give you my opinion here today. This should land on the banks, 100%. Like that's the world we live in. When we don't live in a world where you're guaranteed security by buying SonicWall. There's risk that comes with buying that product. We don't live in a world where if you're not auditing Marquis, you can expect that they're doing the right thing. That's on the banks. I'm going to ask you guys, do you see it any other way?
It's on the banks, but it does remind me of that meme where everybody's pointing the finger at each other, you know? So I think at the end, though, Marquis Software is definitely going to have some type of liability in the sense that the insurance is going to have to pay to the banks. But again, as I was mentioning in our last article, if you're Marquis Software, even if you had a $30 million policy, there's only so much that you, whatever the number is, I don't know, but there's only so much you can divide into the banks. So at the end of the day, the banks aren't going to get a lot of money. I think it's just more they're looking at it as far as the optics, the reputation, as far as the banks to say, you see, it was these guys' fault, it wasn't us. But at the end of the day, the consumer is going to be the one that is going to take the biggest hit because their data's out there and they're only getting 12 months of credit monitoring.
Yep. I would, I'm pretty sure, Andre, when we covered this show, when we covered this attack when it first came out, I'm pretty sure you mentioned the same thing. What in the world were these guys? Why did they have a social security number? Why didn't you have on the bank side, like a bank generated ID, right? That's only for the bank. And then tie that with this third party company. Like I said it in my segment, y'all have both already said it, but it's cliche to talk about, but you got to think about zero trust with everything. And that includes your third party marketing company or whatever. Like, don't give them the entire record of everything they need. Like there's other ways to handle that. I'm not saying at the end of the day, it would have made obviously a difference for people that had their social security number breached, right? They probably still would have got breached. But yeah. So anyway, that's a good point to bring up. I think I'm through on that for a minute.
Well, appreciate it, Randy. So it's just, if you don't know what happens when your vendors get hit, guys, you're going to find out the hard way. That's the moral of the story here. So let's wrap up this show today. Good job today. Appreciate you guys' insights. Randy came at us with an extortion group that uses your outsourced help desk as a master key to walk right into your building. Andre came at us with the Medusa ransomware group update, letting us know that they're still around. They're still stronger than ever. They can go from we're in to you're locked in 24 hours now, which is incredible compared to where we used to be. And they use vulnerabilities nobody knew existed. So I say good luck to you if that organization targets you, because you're going to be in a world of hurt. My story, or my topic of software vendor gets hit through their firewall vendor, SonicWall, and 80 banks find out about 2.5 months later, unfortunately, what happened. And the common thread, it's all the same. We've been pulling at it for about a year now on this show. It feels like that your security is only as strong as the weakest link in your vendor chain, right? Third-party risk all day long. It's not about your network anymore. It is, but it's really not. You need to move on from that and look at who you're outsourcing to and what they're doing. Not your firewall. It's not your vendor's firewall. It's your vendor's support staff, your vendor's backup policy. You're signing contracts with companies every day that have direct access to your data, to your systems, and most of you have no idea what their security and their security stack looks like. That needs to change. So that's Security Squawk for this week. If you found the show useful, I hope you did. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts or watch us on social media. We're on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn. We're on all the podcasting platforms wherever you listen, plus YouTube's. Share the show. It generally helps other people find this stuff, find this content. And you can always find us at our website at securitysquawk.com. And if you really want to support Andre, Randy, and I, you can always buy us a coffee over at buymeacoffee.com/securitysquawk. We appreciate everyone's support. We'll see y'all next week. Stay safe, stay secure. Take care.
Bye, everybody.